Hey, welcome everybody to Sunday night here. It is what? It's 5 p.m. here on the west coast of the United States. Thank you for joining us. And we have some exciting things coming. Hey, real quick, next Sunday night, we're going to be live and in person. John Haller's going to be my guest. 5 p.m. It's going to be at Rise Church in San Marcos, California. That's in the San Diego area of Southern California. I hope that you can join both of us. Rise Church, Pastor Greg Denham is the pastor there. Maybe I'll get him to sit in with us too. It's going to be a great day there Sunday. Erez Soref for One for Israel is going to be there in the morning, and then John and I will be there in the evening with Pastor Greg. Great time. Again, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Join us if you're in Southern California. It is free, so please come on out. We would love to meet you. And that's the first of these many that we have coming. Hey, check this out, all right? Let's roll with a few things. I'm going to share you this as we get updated, as we are continuing with the King David series. Well, let's roll with this first. On the heels of Mark Zuckerberg saying the U.S. government, they made us censor everybody. They made us censor people who were against them, who wouldn't go along with the narrative. We all know that, right? We've experienced it rather significantly here. Well, Zuckerberg says we were told we had to do this by the government. Well, let's go back to a video from 2022 when the government says there's no such thing. Watch this exchange with Josh Hawley.
We have example after example of this administration coordinated, apparently, according to a federal court, by your agency, pressuring, coercing social media companies to engage in censorship. Is that constitutional?
That is unequivocally false.
Is what the emails show.
It is unequivocally false, Senator.
You are not pressuring the big tech companies to take down accounts. You are not meeting with them to ask them to censor on your behalf.
That is correct. We are not.
Here's my point, Mr. Secretary. It has been established for years in this country, as you very well know because you're a lawyer, that the federal government may not use private third parties to engage in activities that are unconstitutional. That's exactly what you and this administration are doing. You are leveraging private companies to carry out censorship on your behalf. It's dystopian, but worse than that, it's unconstitutional.
It's also false.
Yeah, so listen, it's so evident how much these people lie to us that are running this country. And people actually think Kamala Harris is going to be good. Those are the people who want to destroy this country that much more and destroy all that's good. Listen, there's evidence now that the U.S. State Department was specifically not just involved, but ordering the arrest of the CEO of Telegram in France. So you're looking at this going, here are facts. And a lot of us have been saying these things, and then you get taken down, and still can't even talk too much about it. But let it be a warning as we look at the election that's coming up. Vote for Kamala Harris. This is what's going to happen. Listen, just so you know, I'm going to vote against Kamala Harris. I think that the whole thing is just wicked, or whoever they run there. You will see abortion at an unprecedented level. We're going to see anti-Israel hatred come from the U.S. in a way that we could never even imagine before. You start working right on through things. You think you have a gender issue now going on in schools? Wait till the left gets full power of the presidential, the presidency. You start looking at these things. You work through all of them. You think the economy was bad? Wait till you see how much worse it's going to get. I mean, you start looking at all of these things. So when people ask me, are you voting? Yes, and I am going to do my best to vote against Kamala Harris. So you can figure that one out because there's only two possibilities when it comes to candidates that are going to win in November. And so your choice is either Trump or Kamala. And I promise you, I will vote against Kamala Harris because I want my freedoms as much as possible. I want to be able to fight for truth as much as possible. And I do not have much of a fighting chance with Kamala Harris being president of the United States, or anybody from the left for that matter. And I want to be able to continue to be able to preach the gospel and not have to worry about Mayorkas or the U.S. State Department or any of them when it comes to online things. I want to be able to continue to fight for the life of babies that are in the womb. I want to be able to continue to do the fight on behalf of kids that are in schools and gender madness. And I want to be able to continue to press forward in the truth regarding God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Speaking of, check this out, Jewish News Syndicate, state comptroller, 44% of New York hate crimes in 2023 were aimed at Jews. I look at that in this last week. If you watched any of the programs we have from Today in Prophecy to You Can't Make This Up, one of them this week we showed, it was Karine Jean-Pierre, or whatever her name is, the spokesperson for Biden, asked a question about anti-Semitism, and she spun the whole thing. Basically, we haven't really seen the evidence. She spun the whole thing to deal with Islamophobia. And you wonder why there's this problem. But check this out. All Israel News says unprecedented surge in Aliyah. 29,000 Jews immigrate to Israel amid Gaza war and global anti-Semitism. Think about that. We have anti-Semitism rising all over the Western world, not just Europe, but here in America. 29,000 Jews making their aliyah, their citizenship in Israel during a time of war. That is significant. It's safer to be in Israel during a time of war than it is to be in a nation where we see anti-Semitism increase. New York City, the Democratic National Convention, we're seeing on college campuses, absolutely awful. Also, this article, Jewish News Syndicate, Italian Party publishes, get this, blacklist of Jews and Israel supporters. This is over in Italy. And looking at this going, this just reeks of the Nazi era, but this is much broader this time. In the days of Nazi Germany, it was localized to the areas where Hitler had his immediate influence. When you look at where we are now, this is affecting Australia, it's affecting Canada, the U.S. and Europe. U.S. and Europe seem to be the worst when it comes to the anti-Semitism right now. But God said in the Old Testament, I will call them from the north, the south, from the east, and from the west. We see that in the book of Isaiah. And so what is happening? The Jews are going back into their homeland. And thinking along those lines, I remember asking my friend Frank Eichler many years ago from Shalom International, I said, what's it going to take to have Jews leave the comforts of the West and return to Israel? Because God prophesied they will come, the north, south, east, and the west. And he said it's going to have to be something really bad along the lines of anti-Semitism, that people are going to have to turn against the Jews. And we are seeing this turning that is taking place. So much so, World Israel News wrote that Ilhan Omar and Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, rip Biden over Israel support and demand arms embargo. Listen, if you're not voting against Kamala Harris, let me tell you something. You know what you're going to get? She said just before Biden stepped out of the presidential race, for whatever reason, just before that, she said there ought to be she's willing to talk about an arms embargo against Israel. All of a sudden, she has this different rhetoric. I'm telling you, she's a liar. She's a hypocrite. She's already played with the idea of an arms embargo, and that pressure is going to increase. And you look at what's going on in Israel and all these different things, these different dynamics from something like this. Folks, you better be aware, you better be paying attention. But look at this. You look at other things that are going on. We're going to get to the King David series here in just a second, 1 Samuel chapter 20, but I just got to do this quick update. Check this out. Poland realizes that Europe is insane, the United States is insane, realizes the destruction that has come because of how borders are just blown open. Here in America, we see the drug cartels coming in. They're bringing in the Chinese drugs. We see the sex trafficking coming across the southern borders. We've seen attempts by illegal aliens illegal aliens, that's right, is that not politically correct? Tried to get on school buses with children on them in the San Diego area of California just a few days ago. We're witnessing in Aurora, Colorado, an apartment complex completely taken over by illegal Mexican gangs, just destroying everything. And we're watching this different dynamics. And then, of course, we have the problem with not just the drug cartels, but Chinese nationals, Somalis, Islamic terrorists coming through the border. And our government knows that. Then you see the problem going on over in Europe. But guess what? Poland said that's not going to happen. And Poland is actually the leader, doing things the way that they should be done. Check this out. This is check out the short video.
The lowest unemployment in European Union is Poland. The highest GDP after COVID in European Union is Poland. One of the lowest debts in European Union is Poland. So don't give us this rubbish about the need of educated immigration, as we heard yesterday. We don't need your doctors. We don't need your engineers. Take them all, and pay for them. We don't need them. You know why? Because there is zero terrorist attacks in Poland. Why? Because there is no illegal migration in Poland. So don't give me this look. Don't give me these arguments about the populism, because this is a fact. This is your data from Eurostat.
So spot on, and we know it's true. So why is it that these globalists are trying to destroy the Western world? Because that's the world that Antichrist is going to rise out of. But Poland right now is pushing back against this the way Canada did before Trudeau was president. Remember that? When Canada, their president stood up for, our prime minister stood up for Israel, stood with Israel. He was fantastic. Remember that? Well, Poland is doing what should be done. But we have these evil leaders running the Western world. They want to destroy the West because this is where Antichrist comes from. Hey, we're going to get going with the King David series here. We're going to pick up there in just a second. But again, I just have one more quick reminder that John Haller's going to be joining me again. Rise Church, a week from tonight, week from right now, 5 p.m. in San Marcos, California, the San Diego area of California, live and in person. Eric Sorf will be there in the morning, and then myself and John Haller will be there in the evening. Join us. All the information is there at the events page of Hope for Our Times. It's free to attend, so come on out. All right, let's get going with the King David series and see what we have going on here. So David, remember where we left off? We were in 1 Samuel chapter 19, and David had been chased by his father-in-law. David had married Saul's daughter. His father-in-law is Saul, and Saul hated David. He was jealous of David. He tried to kill David twice with a spear. And when David escaped, he went home. And then we went into Psalm 59, where David wrote of that event in Psalm 59, of when Saul has sent his men to surround David at his own daughter's house. Believe it. I mean, it's unbelievable. But that's what he did. And while David's there, he escapes with the help of his wife, Saul's daughter, through a window. He gets out there. He writes Psalm 59. He talks about how he's being surrounded by the dogs, the angry dogs. I mean, you can picture a pack of wild dogs going around the city looking for you, looking to devour you. And that's how David was feeling at that time. So today, David is on the run. He's picking up from right there. David's going to be chased even further out into the wilderness, and his life is about to change. But God is in control. God is a sovereign one. But when you look at it from David's perspective, it's going to seem like this is the worst thing in the world. I can't believe I'm anointed as king. I married the other king's daughter. I'm anointed to be the next king. Life should be good, and it is not. David is going to be sent away from everyone and everything that he knows. It's God who's sending him away. Sent away from family, sent away from friends, sent away from his people, away from everything he knows and everything that is comfortable to him, and he's sent into the wilderness. So we pick up there, 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 21. It says this, and when Saul was told, he sent other messengers, and they prophesied likewise. And then Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they prophesied also. And then he also went to Ramah and came to the great well that is in Seku. And so he asked and said, where are Samuel and David? And someone said, indeed, they are at Naoth in Ramah. So Saul is sending men to look for David. Saul is looking for David, and he continues. So he went there to Naoth in Ramah, and then the Spirit of God was upon him also, and he went on and prophesied until he came to Naoth in Ramah, and he also stripped off his clothes and prophesied before Samuel in like manner, and lay down naked all day, all that day and all that night. Therefore they say, is Saul also among the prophets? I mean, you read this, so you read this and you go, well, this is like one of the weirdest things I've ever read. What's going on here? It is a trip. So again, Saul's chasing David. Saul's men are chasing David. They go to, they want to surround him and they want to kill David. That's chapter 19. That's from where we left off. But when Saul's men come there, they start to prophesy. What's that about? We'll see that in a minute. When Saul comes there, all of a sudden he falls before Samuel. He starts to prophesy. What is all this about? Is God has got a hold of their minds. God's got a hold of their heads. And Saul, I mean, I can imagine he's just going crazy thinking, I can't believe what I'm doing. I can't believe the things that are coming out of my mouth. Okay, we pick up from there. They're at Naoth. We pick up from there in chapter 20, verse 1, and it says, then David fled from Naoth in Ramah. Remember, that's where Saul came to Naoth looking for David. So David flees from there in Ramah, and he went and he said to Jonathan, what have I done? What is my iniquity, and what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? In other words, I can't believe this, Jonathan. Why does your dad hate me so much? So Jonathan said to David, by no means you shall not die, David. Indeed, my father will do nothing either great or small without first telling me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. So David is telling Jonathan, his friend and Saul's son, your dad wants to kill me. Why does he want to do this? Jonathan saying, no, my dad doesn't want to kill you. It's not so. That's not really what he wants to do. David, listen, if my dad wants to do anything, he will tell me first. All right? David, just listen to me. And then David, verse 3, he took an oath again and he said, your father certainly knows that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said, do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. So Jonathan said to David, whatever you yourself desire, I will do it for you. And David said to Jonathan, indeed, tomorrow is a new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king to eat, but let me go that I may hide in the field until the third day at evening. So what's David saying here? Hey, okay, tomorrow I'm supposed to go to the table with you and with the king, with your dad, King Saul, who I'm telling you wants to kill me. But he says, don't, let me off the hook. I can't go to that dinner. I know your dad wants to kill me. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Verse 6, David says, if your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked permission of me that he might run over to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he says thus, it is well, your servant will be safe. But if he is very angry, be sure that evil is determined by your dad. Your dad wants to kill me. Therefore you shall deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. Nevertheless, if there is iniquity in me, kill me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father? Jonathan, is there something wrong with me? I mean, seriously? Then you kill me. I don't want to go to your dad and have him kill me. All these things are going on. But Jonathan said to David, far be it from you, David, for if I knew certainly that evil was determined by my father to come upon you, then would I not tell you? Okay, let's stop there and work through this for a few minutes. So the first thing we notice is David, he's in this place and he's going to have to wait. So number one, it's a time to wait. David doesn't understand the whole thing. He doesn't, it's like, I've got to escape your dad, but God is in control of everything that is going on at this place. God's always in control. God is sovereign, but what's taking place in David's life right now, I promise you, as just a human being, he couldn't possibly think, this is wonderful. This is great. The pressure is going to increase against David in a way that is just absolutely insurmountable. So what we read, first of all, Saul has set different sets of soldiers to go and capture David. They go down to the area of Naioth, and all of a sudden everybody starts to prophesy. And then Saul himself goes, and then he starts to prophesy. By the way, commentators say that prophesying in this context, it implies worship of God. Interesting. Was it worship they were doing? Did they go down there to capture David, and then all of a sudden they started singing out praises to the Lord? Boy, would that mess with your head if you were set on killing someone? Saul recognizes, hey, I've got to get this job done. My soldiers go out there. They start prophesying, or they start singing worship to the Lord when they went down there. This is nuts. I want this job done. I want it done right. I'm going to go kill David myself. So that's why Saul shows up. What happens to him? It says here, we read it in chapter 19, when Saul comes down there, he also starts to prophesy or worship. This is crazy. Chapter 19, verse 24. So Saul strips off his clothes and prophesied before Samuel in like manner, and he lay down naked all day and all night. Therefore they say Saul also among the prophets, or also among the worshipers in this case. Is that what that is implied there? I don't know if it's specific towards prophecy, and he starts speaking truth that maybe what was happening in Saul when the prophecies coming out is David is king, and he's going to be, and all of the things that would happen in the life of David as he raises to kinghood. Could that be what's going on with Saul, which would just enrage him more, but he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He even takes his clothes off, and he lays naked before Samuel. I'm sure Samuel's thinking, hey, this is interesting. You know, people in history will say, well, that's a normal thing to do. I don't think it's that normal to go before Samuel the prophet, take off your clothes and lay there naked and start worshiping or start prophesying. But this is what is going on with Saul. With David. David says, your dad wants to kill me. Clearly he wants to kill him. Hey, think of this though, just something to think about before we move on. Between the soldiers who wanted to kill David, and then they start prophesying or worshiping. Saul wants to kill David, and he starts prophesying or worshiping. Think of this. The pursuers didn't stop the worship or stop the prophesying. The worship stopped the pursuers. I just find that so cool, isn't it? The pursuers didn't stop the worship stopped the pursuers. Or you could say the pursuers didn't stop the Bible prophecy from happening. The Bible prophecy stopped the pursuers in their tracks. Hey, this is just another reminder for you and I. Praise God. Worship the Lord. Preach His truth. God does great things when His word is proclaimed and when His word is also saying. But I imagine this must have been quite strange when these men, and especially Saul, these things started coming out of their mouths. But at this point, David is on the run, as I mentioned. It's only the beginning of his struggles. He's got a long ways to go. But so far, he's fled from his wife. He's fled from his house. He's fled from Naioth, where we just picked up that at the end of verse 9. He fled from Saul. He fled from the prophet Samuel. And he fled to Jonathan, his friend. And Jonathan, his friend, in that passage that we read, verses 1 through 9 of chapter 20, they start having a conversation. And David is explaining to Jonathan, hey, I want you to know how I feel. I'm telling you. And Jonathan's trying to say, I don't think my dad really wants to kill you. David's like, yes, your dad really wants to kill me. And David was right. Jonathan's dad, Saul, really did want to kill him. Death was dogging his steps, as one person said. In Charles Dickens' The Tale of Two Cities, he wrote this: It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. I'm thinking this is what David is thinking, a season of light, a season of darkness, spring of hope, winter of despair. David, way back we saw when he was anointed by Samuel, you're going to be the next king. David has this great time of victory defeating Goliath, the giant, the enemy. All this great joy, all this great hope, but all of a sudden in despair, once light, now in darkness, as he is being pursued and he's being chased and he's being harassed. And so now he's entering into the season of darkness, the season of despair. And the thing about it is David was a man just like us. He had the same passions, he has the same doubts, he has the same fears, and the repeated attempts of Saul upon his life had thoroughly unnerved him. And we see it in his own words in verse 3, while he's talking to Jonathan. Look what he says in verse 3. He says, "But truly, as the Lord lives and your soul lives, Jonathan, there is but a step between me and death." Between me and death, there's but a step. I'm telling you, he's not. He goes, "I'm not crazy. This is what is really going on, and it's here in this place, this very place. This is kind of crazy, where David is told, David, you got to wait here." So Jonathan says, "I'm going to go to the dinner. I'm going to see what my dad his real intentions are. David, I'm going to give you a sign so you're going to know, yep, you're right. My dad really wants to kill you, or it's going to be good for you. And but you're going to have to trust me." They're going to make a commitment to each other. But look how this starts to go. It's this passage, you may have heard about it before, where Jonathan is going to take an arrow. And he's going to shoot an arrow. It's going to go over David's head. If it goes over David's head, that's the signal. David, if the arrow goes over your head, you go, you flee. My dad wants to kill you. If I shoot an arrow like I'm shooting at a target over to the side, and then myself and my servant go and pick up that arrow, that's the sign for you to come. It's safe for you to come. It's a very fascinating passage. And he's also told to wait. And this is the waiting place. Wait at the stone easel, which becomes a very specific thing, a very significant thing, not just for David, but for you and I to wait at the stone easel. You'll see why in just a second. Let's pick up chapter 20, verse 10, 1 Samuel, where it says, David said to Jonathan, verse 10, "Who will tell me, or what if your father answers you roughly, Jonathan?" And Jonathan said to David, "Come, let us go out into the field." So both of them went out into the field. And Jonathan said to David, "The Lord God of Israel is witness when I have sounded out my father sometime tomorrow or the third day, and indeed there is good toward David, and I do not send to you and tell you, may the Lord do so and much more to Jonathan. But if it pleases my father to do you evil, then I will report it to you and send you away that you may go in safety. And the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. And you shall not only show me the kindness of the Lord while I still live, that I may not die, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord has cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth." So in other words, this conversation with David and Jonathan, this is what Jonathan is saying. Okay, I'm going to go back to my dad's house, back to the king's house. And if my dad wants to kill you, and you're right, David, you got to promise me, understand it like this. If Jonathan's dad is king, that means that the rightful heir to the throne when Saul dies would be Jonathan. Jonathan should be the next king. Okay, we already looked at that last time, but Jonathan recognized David was the anointed one by the Lord. So David had already given Jonathan had already given his allegiance over to David, recognizing David as the next king. So what Jonathan is saying here, okay, when my dad dies and when all of your enemies have been killed, David, I need you to not come after me. I got to have you promise you aren't going to come after me, because that's what the new king does, right? He kills all of those who might be an heir to the throne. So Jonathan's saying, don't do that to me, and I need you to not cut off anybody from the house of Saul. Don't kill anyone. I need you to show kindness. David, will you do that? Even though you might think you have the right to slaughter everybody from my dad's house, David, don't do that. And Jonathan and David, let me tell you, they're knit at the heart. They really cared for each other, but the conversation got exceptionally serious at this point. So that's what's going on here. And he picks up and he says, so Jonathan, verse 16, made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord require it at the hand of David's enemies. Now Jonathan again caused David to vow because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. And then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. In other words, your seat at my dad's table for dinner. You're not going to be there at the feast. So you're going to be missed, right? Everybody's going to know you're gone. And when you have stayed 3 days, go down quickly and come to the place where you hid on the day of the deed and remain by the stone easel. Interesting. Remember, I told you we're going to come to the stone easel? Very significant. Then I will shoot 3 arrows to the side as though I shot at the target. And there I will send a lad saying, go find the arrows. If I expressly say to the lad, look, their arrows are on this side of you, get them and come, then as the Lord lives, there is safety for you and no harm. But if I say thus to the young man, look, the arrows are beyond you, go your way, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter which you and I have spoken of, indeed, the Lord is between you and me forever. Then David hid in the field, and when the new moon had come, the king sat down to eat at the feast. All right, so you got all of that stuff going on there, right? Again, there's the feast is at Saul's house. Jonathan's going home to his dad, the king. David's not there. There's an empty seat. But Jonathan says, David, you know I love you. All right, please, just let's have this commitment. And they did have a commitment. David promised to Jonathan he would not bring any harm upon the Saul's house. He wouldn't bring any harm to Jonathan or Mephibosheth, you see later, and so forth. So David was gone. They really did care about each other deeply. They were the best of friends. So Jonathan says, hey, I'm going to take this arrow, shoot it over your head, flee. My dad wants to kill you. If it goes to the side, come on home. It's going to be safe. But David, you need to be trusted. Here, before we move on, note how close to home this becomes for you and me. Note this. When doing God's work, David became a target, all right? David became a target. Saul wants to kill him. When you do God's work, you will become a target. I talk to people sometimes and they'll say, well, I'm not really going through, I don't really have too many trials. I don't really have too many difficulties. I don't really have much going on. Hey, listen, if you're not doing much for the Lord, the devil doesn't have much of a reason to stop you. I mean, hey, this guy isn't really, he's not moving forward in the Lord. Listen, when you are doing God's work, when you are moving forward in the things of the Lord, I promise you're going to become a target. You're going to feel the pain. You're going to feel the pressure. You're going to go through difficulties. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be tested. In this case, David is sent away for his own protection, for the time when he would raise up to be king, but he also went through some very miserable things. And like you said, in verse 3, between you and me, there's just this, there's but one step between me and death, Jonathan. Your dad really does want to kill me. When you look at this in the life of David, you could think, how could this possibly fit into God's plan for David? It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense to us. I guarantee you it didn't make sense to David. Even when you look at it and you think, well, God could have just put David in there and taken Saul out. God could have, but he didn't. God shaped David in the years of wandering in the wilderness, running for his own life, being afraid. He shaped him when he was younger, when he was rejected by his own family. He shaped him in the years in the times that Saul that David would go to Saul's house. And the 2 times that Saul took a spear and threw it at David to try and kill him. He shaped David through all these different life experiences that he had. And it was a long time of being a fugitive. It was a long time of being on the run. Indeed, David was in a place of despair and doubt. He was a man like us with passions. He had moments of great faith that defeated giants and armies, but moments of despair where he could only see his trouble, and the promises of God to him were vague. And we can be that way too. Think of it like this. Every outward circumstance of David's life seemed to give place to the lie that God's promises could not be trusted. Let that sink in. Every outward circumstance of David's life seemed to give place to the lie that God's promises could not be trusted. But they could. But we go to those same areas, don't we? Things aren't going the way we want, or it's real difficult, and then we start thinking God's forgotten us, or God just doesn't care about us, or why did I move to this city, or why did I do this, or why did I do that? And we can really wonder, am I even in God's will? I mean, it's all the outward circumstances and the pain and the pressure cause us to start to think, maybe God's not with me in this. It's a funny thing, when things are going well for you outwardly, the outward circumstances are going well, you got money in the bank account, people like you, bills are all paid, that kind of stuff. You kind of feel like, yeah, God loves me, right? That could be the devil blessing you, not God at all. But God had David's attention. Although the outward circumstances were different, David had to go through these difficult things. Listen, I want to point this out before we go to the end. And I mentioned the stone easel is really interesting because in verse 19, look at this. Verse 19, Jonathan tells David, hey, wait by the stone easel. Now, the stone easel, to me, this is significant. It was a memorial stone. It marks a departure. That's what it did here. And it has a couple of different thoughts behind it. It's the stone that shows the way, or it's the stone that shapes. I look at the stone easel, I think of us in our own life, and I think, okay, God, you've taken me to that rock, to that place. David, this is where you're to wait, by the stone easel, a memorial stone, marking a departure. This is the place. We might have a date. It marks our departure from this. Or a time that something shows us the way, like the stone easel. Or we can say, it's this one event in my life that shaped my life. There's certain events we all have, I believe, that shape our life, shape our thinking. And God moves us through those things because of the way that he molds us. We think of Romans chapter 8, verse 29. For God works all things for good for those who love him, for those who are called according to his purpose. He doesn't say all things are good. These aren't good things that are happening to David when someone wants to kill him. He doesn't say all things are good, but all things work together for good. In other words, God will use the bad things to work for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Verse 29 of Romans chapter 8 goes on and says that the purpose of it is that we would be conformed into the image of his Son. That's the purpose of it. All things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose, that we might be conformed into the image of his Son. God forms us, and it's the rocks, the difficult things in life that shape us, that move us in another direction. But also, you don't want to forget this. When you think of this, what happens is, this is stone easel. It reminds me of Jesus, who is the rock of ages, right? He is our rock. He is the one who shapes us. He is the one that shows us the way. He is the one that says, hey, it's now time to depart from here, and it's time to go over there. He is the one that the moment you come to him in faith and you get saved, it marks our departure, just like the stone easel, all of those different things. It's the salvation of the Lord. He is the rock of ages. Isaiah chapter 28 tells us that he is the foundation stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 tells us that he is the stone which the builders rejected, who has become the chief cornerstone. Listen, I'm going to get through the rest of this rather quickly. I want to show you something here. As you continue reading through chapter 20 from verse 25 on, this is what happens. Jonathan sits at the table to eat. David's at stone easel waiting. Jonathan sits at the table to eat, and the king is there. And what happens with King Saul, he sits at the seat, and he sees, hey, where's David? He's not sitting in a seat. Hey, David's supposed to be here eating. Hey, David, maybe he'll be here tomorrow. David never shows up. And he starts to realize, Saul does, in the remaining verses of chapter 20, that that Jonathan, his son, is covering for David. He gets so mad at Jonathan, his son, because he wants David to show up at the house. Because when remember the last time he went to find David, he starts prophesying, he starts worshiping. This is a problem. So now if David comes to the house to eat this is the king's table, to sit at the king's table, Saul was thinking, I'm going to kill him when he comes in the house. He didn't come in the house. So now he realizes, hey, my son Jonathan is covering for David. He's covering for him. So the most interesting thing happens. Guess what Saul does when he realizes his son Jonathan is covering for David? Chapter 20 tells us that Saul picks up a spear, just like he threw a spear at David twice and missed. He picks up a spear and he throws it at his own son Jonathan. That is just nuts. You look at this and you go, this is just unbelievable. He actually throws it at his own son Jonathan, trying to kill him. So what's Jonathan recognize at that point? He says, I'm out of here. Jonathan leaves. He gets his arrows. He goes out and he shoots an arrow, and it goes over David's head, and David recognizes, I'm being sent away. David is taken away to a place. He knows his whole life has changed. It's never going to get back to normal. He's not going to go back to that king's house. But you know what the beauty of it is, when you look at David's life, this is the beginning of the nation of Israel. If you're to say Israel as you know it, this is kind of it, although this is 3,000 years ago. But you see King David, then you see the Davidic covenant that comes later. David wanted to build a temple for the Lord. The Lord said, no, but I'm going to do something greater than you. And then we recognize that God is promising the Messiah was going to come through the lineage of David. But God was doing something absolutely remarkable in the life of David, but David's life was never going to be normal. And you might be looking at your life going, my life is just... You're not going back to normal. Listen, this globe is not going back to normal. And it's understanding that our life is about the King of Kings. Although King Jesus, the Messiah, was going to come through the lineage of David, you and I have the opportunity to share the hope of the Lord Jesus Christ with everyone. I look at this world, and we can see it, the trajectory. It's on this fast pace toward the tribulation period. Folks, we have the hope of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, and we have an opportunity to tell others about this. And I want to encourage you, because I don't think there's time to waste anymore. And by the way, this is some really cool news. This ministry, Hope for Our Times, now reaches 107 countries, 107 different countries. Around the world. And some of the countries, obviously USA, Canada, Australia, the UK, South Africa, New Zealand, Netherlands, Philippines, Germany, India. But check this out, also Israel, which I know you guys know that, the UAE, United Arab Emirates. There's people watching in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Zimbabwe, Namibia. And you look at this and go, this is just, it's unbelievable what God is doing. And although this world's never going back to normal. We have the hope of the Lord Jesus Christ. And listen, let's together, we move forward and we recognize we're going to tell others about Jesus. We're going to give them the hope of the Lord Jesus Christ. God sends us away, shoots an arrow over our head, sends us away from everything that's comfortable to us, just like he did with David. And I'm pretty confident a lot of you are in very uncomfortable places going, why am I in this place? Take heart. God is in control. David didn't have a comfortable life, but David was called by the Lord, and he used it for the glory of God. God bless you guys. Hey, listen, join me tomorrow. We've got our Today in Prophecy. I hope you enjoy this new news program that we have going on every day, Monday through Thursday, our daily news updates, news in 15 minutes or less. We have the Tom Hughes Report on Wednesdays. I have some exciting interviews coming up this week, but also we have the website exclusive app and website exclusive every Wednesday now. Join us there, things you aren't going to get on the regular program. But joining me this Tuesday, check it out. Bill Federer is joining me this Tuesday. And that's going to be off the charts because he's also going to join us at the conference in November in Temecula. One final reminder, next Sunday night, 1 week from tonight, join me. John Haller's going to be my guest at Rise Church in San Marcos, California. All the information is on the website. God bless you guys. Oh, and Lee's going to join me on the app exclusive this week. God bless you guys.